My phone screamed at 2:17 a.m. I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour shift at Chicago General, still wearing scrubs that smelled like disinfectant and other people's pain. My feet throbbed, my back ached. All I wanted was to collapse into bed and forget the world for 6 hours. The caller ID said Maggie Thompson, Dorothy's neighbor. My stomach dropped. "Sarah?" Maggie's voice cracked through the phone. "Honey, you need to come home. Your grandmother collapsed this afternoon. She's in hospice now, and she's been asking for you." The words hit like ice water. "What? When? Where's everyone else?" "Cedar Falls Memorial, the hospice wing." Maggie paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "I called your Uncle Bob around 3 this afternoon. He said he'd handle notifying the family." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. And another pause, longer this time. "Sarah, nobody's been to see her. Not one person." I was already moving, pulling clothes from my dresser with one hand while holding the phone with the other. "What do you mean, nobody's been to see her?" "I mean, she's been lying in that bed for 8 hours, asking every nurse who walks by if you're coming yet. When I left at 9 tonight, she grabbed my hand so tight it hurt and whispered, 'Tell Sarah to hurry.'" My chest tightened. Grandma Dorothy, alone, in a sterile room, surrounded by strangers, waiting for someone who loved her to show up. "I'm coming," I said, shoving clothes into a bag. "I'm leaving right now." "Drive safe, honey. And Sarah?" Maggie's voice softened. "She's been sharp as a tack. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I hung up and stood there for a moment in my cramped studio apartment. The city hummed outside my window, 20 floors below. Traffic that never slept, people living their lives while mine cracked open. Again. This was what I did. Drop everything, run toward the emergency, be the one who showed up when nobody else would. I'd done it when Uncle Bob's business nearly failed 3 years ago. I'd done it when Cousin Tyler got arrested and needed bail money. I'd done it when Aunt Patty's mother had her stroke and Panny was too overwhelmed to handle everything. Every time, I was the solution, the reliable one, the one who'd figure it out, fix it, make it better. And every time, afterward, they'd go back to their lives and forget I existed until the next crisis. But this was different. This was Grandma Dorothy. I threw my bag in the car and started driving. 500 miles of highway stretched ahead of me, dark and endless. The radio played soft jazz, but I turned it off. I needed the silence to think. Or maybe I needed the silence so I wouldn't think. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate Jess. "Everything okay? Heard you leave." "Grandma's dying. Driving to Cedar Falls," I typed back at a red light. "Jesus, want me to come with you?" I stared at the message. Jess would come. She'd drop everything, call in sick to her graphic design job, and sit in a car for 10 hours just to hold my hand. That's what real family did. "No, but thank you. I love you for offering. Call me when you get there. Love you too." Real family. The kind that showed up without being asked. The kind that worried about you instead of what they could get from you. I kept driving. Around mile marker 127, I called Uncle Bob. It went straight to voicemail. I'd tried Aunt Patty, same thing. Tyler's phone wasn't even in service anymore. But they'd all been notified. They all knew Grandma was dying, they just had better things to do. I thought about Bob's house, 10 minutes from the hospital. 10 minutes! I was driving through the night, using vacation days I couldn't afford to lose, probably spending money I didn't have on gas because I loved her. They were sleeping in their warm beds 10 minutes away. The highway blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept driving. By the time I hit mile marker 200, the rage had settled into something colder, cleaner. I'd been the family's emergency responder for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised by their selfishness. But this crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Grandma Dorothy wasn't just family. She was the only person in that entire toxic web who'd ever truly loved me without conditions. When I was 17 and they kicked me out for refusing to lie about Tyler's drug problem, she's the one who helped me apply for nursing school.
When I graduated, she's the one who came to the ceremony while they couldn't make it. She never asked me for money, never guilt-tripped me into visiting, never made me feel like I owed her something for existing. And now she was dying alone because her own children were too busy, too important, too whatever, to drive 10 goddamn minutes. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The speedometer crept up. Trees rushed past in the darkness like accusations. My phone rang again around 4 a.m. This time it was Bob. Jesus, Sarah, what time is it? Maggie said you were driving down. You don't need to do that. I almost laughed. What do you mean I don't need to do that?
My phone screamed at 2:17 a.m. I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour shift at Chicago General, still wearing scrubs that smelled like disinfectant and other people's pain. My feet throbbed. My back ached. All I wanted was to collapse into bed and forget the world for 6 hours. The caller ID said Maggie Thompson, Dorothy's neighbor. My stomach dropped. Sarah? Maggie's voice cracked through the phone. Honey, you need to come home. Your grandmother collapsed this afternoon. She's in hospice now, and she's been asking for you. The words hit like ice water. What? When? Where's everyone else? Cedar Falls Memorial, the hospice wing. Maggie paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. I called your Uncle Bob around 3 this afternoon. He said he'd handle notifying the family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. And? Another pause. Longer this time. Sarah, nobody's been to see her. Not one person. I was already moving, pulling clothes from my dresser with one hand while holding the phone with the other. What do you mean nobody's been to see her? I mean, she's been lying in that bed for 8 hours asking every nurse who walks by if you're coming yet. When I left at 9 tonight, she grabbed my hand so tight it hurt and whispered, "Tell Sarah to hurry." My chest tightened. Grandma Dorothy, alone, in a sterile room, surrounded by strangers, waiting for someone who loved her to show up. "I'm coming," I said, shoving clothes into a bag. "I'm leaving right now." "Drive safe, honey. And Sarah," Maggie's voice softened, "she's been sharp as a tack. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I hung up and stood there for a moment in my cramped studio apartment. The city hummed outside my window, 20 floors below, traffic that never slept. People living their lives while mine cracked open. Again. This was what I did. Drop everything, run toward the emergency, be the one who showed up when nobody else would. I'd done it when Uncle Bob's business nearly failed 3 years ago. I'd done it when Cousin Tyler got arrested and needed bail money. I'd done it when Aunt Patty's mother had a stroke and Patty was too overwhelmed to handle everything. Every time, I was the solution, the reliable one, the one who'd figure it out, fix it, make it better.
And every time, afterward, they'd go back to their lives and forget I existed. Until the next crisis. But this was different. This was Grandma Dorothy. I threw my bag in the car and started driving. 500 miles of highway stretched ahead of me, dark and endless. The radio played soft jazz, but I turned it off. I needed the silence to think. Or maybe I needed the silence so I wouldn't think. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate, Jess. "Everything okay? Heard you leave." "Grandma's dying, driving to Cedar Falls." I typed back at a red light. "Jesus. Want me to come with you?" I stared at the message. Jess would come. She'd drop everything, call in sick to her graphic design job, and sit in a car for 10 hours just to hold my hand. That's what real family did. No, but thank you. I love you for offering. Call me when you get there. Love you too. Real family. The kind that showed up without being asked. The kind that worried about you instead of what they could get from you. I kept driving. Around mile marker 127, I called Uncle Bob. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Aunt Patty, same thing. Tyler's phone wasn't even in service anymore. But they'd all been notified. They all knew Grandma was dying. They just had better things to do. I thought about Bob's house, 10 minutes from the hospital. 10 minutes! I was driving through the night, using vacation days I couldn't afford to lose, probably spending money I didn't have on gas, because I loved her. They were sleeping in their warm beds 10 minutes away. The highway blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept driving. By the time I hit mile marker 200, the rage had settled into something colder, cleaner. I'd been the family's emergency responder for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised by their selfishness. But this crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Grandma Dorothy wasn't just family. She was the only person in that entire toxic web who'd ever truly loved me without conditions. When I was 17 and they kicked me out for refusing to lie about Tyler's drug problem, she's the one who helped me apply for nursing school. When I graduated, she's the one who came to the ceremony while they couldn't make it. She never asked me for money, never guilt-tripped me into visiting, never made me feel like I owed her something for existing. And now she was dying alone because her own children were too busy, too important, too whatever, to drive 10 goddamn minutes. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The speedometer crept up. Trees rushed past in the darkness like accusations. My phone rang again around 4 a.m. This time it was Bob. "Sarah, Jesus, what time is it? Maggie said you were driving down. You don't need to do that." I almost laughed. "What do you mean I don't need to do that?"
You seem surprised that I know things, she said, reading my expression perfectly. People assume that because you're old and sick, you're also stupid. They forget that phones work both ways, that neighbors talk, that bank statements come in the mail. Bank statements? Something cold crawled up my spine. What do you mean? I mean, I've been watching, Sarah, for years now. Watching and listening and taking notes. She gestured weakly toward the bedside table. Hand me that notebook, the blue one. I reached for a small spiral notebook tucked between a water pitcher and a box of tissues. It looked old, the cover worn soft from handling. When I opened it, I saw page after page of Grandma Dorothy's careful handwriting. Dates, times, amounts of money? What is this? Evidence, she said simply, of every time they've lied to me, stolen from me, or used me for their own benefit. Go on, read it. I flipped through the pages, my stomach dropping with each entry. March 15th, 2022. Bob borrowed $2,000 for emergency roof repair. Drove by his house today. Roof looks fine. June 3rd, 2022. Patty used my debit card at Target. Said it was for groceries for me. Receipt shows wine, makeup, clothes. Nothing I would use. September 10th, 2022. Tyler called crying about his car payment. Sent him $800. Maggie saw him at the casino that same night. December 1st, 2022. Bob signed me up for life insurance without telling me. Premium comes out of my checking account automatically. He's the beneficiary. Page after page, months of documentation, years of betrayal carefully recorded in blue ink. Grandma, this is... I didn't know how to finish the sentence. Criminal? Yes, some of it probably is. She reached over and turned a few pages forward. But this is my favorite part. The entries became more detailed. Timestamps, screenshots of text messages, even audio recordings marked with small symbols that looked like speaker icons. February 14th, 2023. Bob called asking for money for Patty's birthday dinner. Said they were struggling. Maggie saw them at the country club the same night. Recorded the conversation. March 22nd, 2023. Tyler borrowed $500 for job interview clothes. Posted Instagram photos wearing the clothes at a party. Screenshots saved. April 18th.
2023. Found out Bob has been telling people I'm losing my mind and can't handle my own finances. Recorded him saying this to Patty on speakerphone. I looked up at her. How long have you been doing this? 2.5 years, ever since I realized what they really thought of me. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. They assumed I was too old and foolish to notice when money went missing, too trusting to question their stories, too weak to fight back. But why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you stop them? Because I needed to know how far they'd go. I needed to document the pattern. She pointed to the notebook. One incident could be explained away. A misunderstanding, desperation, but 2.5 years of systematic theft and manipulation? That tells a different story. I felt like I was seeing her for the first time. This wasn't the sweet, naive grandmother I thought I knew. This was someone entirely different. Someone who'd been playing a long game while everyone else assumed she was helpless. "There's more," she said, nodding toward a small pile of folders on the windowsill. Bank statements, email printouts, photographs, everything organized by date and perpetrator. "Grandma, what are you planning to do with all this?" She smiled, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked truly happy. "That depends on you, sweetheart. Are you ready to help me finish what I started?" The next 3 days passed in a strange rhythm. I'd sleep fitfully in the chair beside Grandma Dorothy's bed, wake up to help her with breakfast, then watch the parade of family members who suddenly remembered she existed. But only when it was convenient. Bob arrived first, around noon on Sunday, carrying a small bouquet of flowers that looked like he'd grabbed them from the hospital gift shop on his way up. He kissed Grandma Dorothy's forehead with the mechanical precision of someone fulfilling an obligation. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Like I'm dying, Robert. How are you feeling?" He laughed uncomfortably. "Don't be so dramatic. The doctor said you could have weeks, maybe months." "Month." He said it like it was an inconvenience. I watched him arrange the flowers in a plastic vase, noticed how he avoided making eye contact with her, how he kept checking his phone, how he positioned himself near the door like he was already planning his escape. "I brought some paperwork," he said, pulling a manila folder from his briefcase. "Just some routine stuff. Power of attorney updates, medical directive forms. Nothing urgent, but we should get it taken care of while you're here." Grandma Dorothy's eyes found mine over his shoulder. There was something almost amused in her expression, like she was watching a predictable movie play out. "What kind of power of attorney?" she asked. "Oh, general stuff. Just so I can handle your bills, manage your accounts if you're not feeling up to it. Take some of the burden off your shoulders." "My shoulders feel fine, Robert." "Well, sure, now they do. But if you get sicker or if you need to go into long-term care..." "I'm in hospice, son. Long-term care isn't really the concern anymore."
Bob's face reddened. "I'm just trying to help, Mom. Trying to make sure everything's organized so Sarah doesn't have to worry about it." And there it was. The subtle shift that made everything my responsibility. If she didn't sign the papers, I'd have to worry about it. I'd be the one dealing with the complexity and chaos they were trying to prevent. It was masterful, really. Make me the beneficiary of their planning so I'd feel guilty for objecting to it. "I'll think about it," Grandma Dorothy said, but she made no move to take the papers. Bob's jaw tightened. "Mom, this really isn't something to think about. It's just common sense. Every family does this." "Then why didn't we do it before now?" Silence. "I mean, you've had power of attorney over your own affairs for 84 years. If it was so important to transfer that to someone else, why wait until I'm in hospice?" Bob shot me a look like this was somehow my fault, like I was coaching her to be difficult. "Because we didn't think... you've always been so independent. And now I'm not? Now you're sick." "My mind isn't sick, Robert."
The words hung in the air like a challenge. Bob gathered up his papers with sharp, angry movements. Fine, we'll talk about this later, when you're feeling more reasonable. He left without saying goodbye to me, without asking if I needed anything, without acknowledging that I'd been there for 3 days straight while he managed a 20-minute visit. Grandma Dorothy waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway, then reached for her phone. I watched her fingers move across the screen with surprising dexterity for someone who was supposedly too frail to manage her own affairs. "What are you doing?" "Voice memo," she said, holding up the phone. "Timestamp, Sunday, 1:47 p.m. Robert Mitchell attempted to pressure dying mother into signing power of attorney documents, became angry when questioned about timing and necessity, left abruptly when challenged about mother's mental competency." She stopped the recording and smiled at me. He has no idea I've been documenting these conversations for months. "Grandma, why are you doing this? What's the point?" "The point, sweetheart, is accountability." She set the phone on the bedside table. "They've gotten away with treating me like an ATM for years because I let them, because I made excuses for them, because I prioritized family peace over family honesty." "But you're dying. Why does it matter now?" Her expression softened. "Because you're not dying, Sarah. And I won't have you spending the rest of your life being their emergency fund and emotional caretaker. You deserve better than that." Before I could respond, Patty appeared in the doorway, with Tyler trailing behind her. She wore a black dress that looked more appropriate for a cocktail party than a hospital visit, and Tyler hadn't bothered to change out of his pajama pants. "Oh, Dorothy!" Patty rushed to the bed with theatrical concern. "How are you feeling?" "About the same as someone in hospice usually feels, I imagine." Tyler slouched in the corner, scrolling through his phone. "This place smells weird," he mumbled. "Tyler!" Patty's voice carried a warning. "What? It does." Patty turned back to Grandma Dorothy with an apologetic smile. "He's just tired. We've all been so worried about you." "Worried enough to visit before today?" The question landed like a slap. Patty's smile flickered. "Well, we didn't want to overwhelm you. We thought you might need time to rest, get settled in. I've been here 4 days, Patricia. And we came as soon as we could. You know how busy weekends are with Tyler's job interviews and my lesson planning." Tyler snorted. "I haven't had a job interview in months." "Tyler!" "What? You told me to be honest with Grandma. I'm being honest." Grandma Dorothy's eyes moved between them like she was watching a tennis match. I could practically see her mental notebook filling up with new entries. "Speaking of honesty," she said, "Tyler, how much money do you owe me?" The room went dead silent. Tyler's phone stopped scrolling. Patty's mouth opened and closed without sound. What do you mean?" "I mean all the loans I've given you over the past 2 years. How much do you think that adds up to?" "Mom," Patty intervened, "this really isn't the time." "When is the time, Patricia? When I'm dead?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know, a few hundred maybe?" "A few hundred?" Grandma Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. My records show $3,274. Would you like me to read through the list?" She reached for the blue notebook, but Patty stepped forward quickly. "That's not necessary, Dorothy. I'm sure if there's any discrepancy, we can work it out later." "Oh, there's no discrepancy. I have receipts, bank transfers, text messages asking for money, and even a few voice recordings of Tyler explaining why he needed the loans." Tyler's face went white. "You recorded me?" "I recorded conversations where you asked me for money under false pretenses, like the time you needed $800 for car repairs, but Maggie saw you at the casino that same night. Grandma, I can explain. Or the time you needed $400 for job interview clothes, then posted Instagram photos of yourself wearing those same clothes to a party? Patty grabbed Tyler's arm. We should go, let Dorothy rest. But Grandma Dorothy was not finished. Or my personal favorite, the $600 you needed for books and supplies when you went back to community college. Except you never enrolled, did you, Tyler? Tyler looked like he was going to be sick. I was planning to enroll.
When? It's been 8 months. Things got complicated. Things got expensive, you mean. Gambling debts are expensive. The word gambling hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Patty's grip on Tyler's arm tightened, her knuckles white. We're leaving, she announced. This conversation is inappropriate and upsetting. What's upsetting, Grandma Dorothy said calmly, is discovering that your own family sees you as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. They left in a flurry of offended dignity and hurt feelings. Tyler didn't even say goodbye. Patty paused at the door long enough to say, I hope you feel better, Dorothy, but her tone suggested she hoped for the opposite. When they were gone, Grandma Dorothy picked up her phone again. Voice memo. Sunday, 2:23 p.m. Patricia and Tyler Mitchell visit. Tyler admits to approximately $3,200 in unpaid loans, but significantly underestimates the amount. Becomes visibly distressed when confronted with evidence of gambling activities and false pretenses for loan requests. Both family members leave abruptly when questioned about accountability. She stopped the recording and looked at me. How am I doing so far? I stared at her. You're terrifying. Good, she said, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely proud. They have no idea what's coming. What is coming, Grandma? Justice, sweetheart. She patted my hand. Finally, after all these years, justice. By Tuesday night, Grandma Dorothy looked smaller. The hospice staff had been honest about the timeline. Days, not weeks. Her breathing was shallower, her voice softer, but her mind remained razor sharp. Pull that folder from the window, she said, pointing a trembling finger toward the stack of documents I'd been pretending not to notice. The thick manila one. I retrieved it, surprised by its weight. It had to be 2 inches thick, bulging with papers and photographs. Open it. Inside were bank statements going back 3 years. Every page had been carefully marked with highlighter and sticky notes in Dorothy's neat handwriting. Yellow for suspicious transactions, pink for forged signatures, blue for transfers she never authorized. Jesus, Grandma. Start with the yellow ones, she said. Those are my favorites. I flipped through pages of bank records, each one telling a story of systematic theft. Bob's signature on withdrawal slips for amounts that Dorothy had never seen. Patty's name on checks written from Dorothy's account for purchases Dorothy had never made. Electronic transfers to Tyler's account with memo lines that read, emergency loan, but patterns that suggested something far more routine. This one, Dorothy said, pointing to a circled entry from last October. Bob told me he needed to borrow $3,000 for a new furnace. Emergency replacement, couldn't wait, would pay me back within the month. I looked at the highlighted section, a withdrawal for exactly $3,000 dated October 15th. Did he pay you back? What do you think? She smiled grimly. But here's the interesting part. Look at the next page.
I turned the page to find a photograph paperclipped to the bank statement. It showed Bob and Patty on what looked like a cruise ship, drinks in their hands, tropical ocean in the background. The date stamp read October 18th. 3 days after his emergency furnace replacement, they were in the Caribbean. Dorothy's voice carried a satisfaction that was almost frightening. Maggie helped me figure out how to reverse search photos on social media. Turns out they posted the whole vacation online. I stared at the evidence. It was devastating and methodical and completely undeniable. How long have you been planning this? 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. She didn't hesitate. Ever since I realized that Bob had been telling people I was losing my mental capacity, making himself look like the caring son who is protecting his confused mother from financial mistakes. But you're not confused. No, sweetheart, I'm angry. She reached for another folder. This one contains recordings. I started keeping my phone on speaker whenever they called. Set it to record everything. Amazing how honest people become when they think no one's listening. She handed me a small digital recorder, the kind lawyers use for depositions. Press play on file number 7. I pressed the button. Bob's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. I'm telling you, Patty, she's completely out of it. Asked me the same question 3 times yesterday. We need to move fast before she gets worse. What if Sarah objects? Patty's voice, anxious. Sarah's in Chicago. She doesn't know what mom's really like day to day. Besides, once we have power of attorney, it won't matter what Sarah thinks. But what if she contests it later? With what evidence? Mom won't even remember signing the papers by then. The recording stopped. Dorothy watched my face carefully. That was recorded 2 weeks ago, she said. While Bob was visiting, supposedly concerned about my health, I was pretending to nap while they talked in the kitchen. I felt sick. They were planning to steal everything. Not steal, manage. That's what they call it when they take your money for your own good. She showed me more recordings, phone conversations where they discussed how much money Dorothy had, what her monthly expenses were, how they could help by taking over her financial responsibilities. In every single recording, they talked about her like she wasn't there, like she was already gone. The lawyer's coming tomorrow, Dorothy said suddenly. What lawyer? Harrison Webb. I hired him 6 months ago. She pulled out a business card, worn soft from handling. Elder law specialist. Very expensive, very thorough. Grandma, what did you hire him for? To make sure my will reflects reality instead of wishful thinking. She closed her eyes, suddenly looking exhausted. And to make sure that when I'm gone, the truth doesn't die with me. I sat back in the visitor's chair, my head spinning. What kind of will? The kind with video messages, the kind with evidence attached, the kind that doesn't just divide assets. It explains why they're being divided the way they are. Video messages? Dorothy smiled, and despite her frailness, it was sharp as a blade. Oh yes, one for each of them. Detailed explanations of every lie, every theft, every manipulation, with documentation, with proof. When did you record them? Last month. Mr. Webb brought a camera crew to my house. Very professional. Took us 3 days to get through everything. She paused. Would you like to know what your video says? I get a video too? Everyone gets a video, sweetheart, but yours is different. She reached for one final folder, this one labeled Sarah in her careful script. Yours explains why you're getting the house, the savings account, the investment portfolio, and everything else of value. It explains that you are the only one who loved me without conditions, who visited without agenda, who never asked for anything except my happiness. I stared at her. Grandma, I can't. Yes, you can and you will. Because they're going to challenge it. They're going to claim I was mentally incompetent, that you manipulated me, that I didn't understand what I was signing. What if they're right? What if I shouldn't? Sarah, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. Look at me. Look at all of this evidence. Look at what they've done to me, to you, to this family. Do you think they deserve to profit from my death? No. Do you think they'll take care of you when I'm gone? Support you, love you, treat you like family? No. Then stop arguing with justice. Dorothy died at 4:17 a.m. on Thursday morning. I was holding her hand, had been holding her hand for 2 hours while she drifted in and out of consciousness. Her last words were barely a whisper. Make them understand. I understood. Finally. Completely. I understood. The nurse who came to check her vitals looked at me with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, honey. She was a special lady. Yeah, she was. You should be proud. She talked about you constantly. Always said you were the only one who really got her. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Do you need help calling family? Family. Right. I had to call the people who'd let her die alone, who'd stolen from her, who'd planned to steal even more. I had to tell them she was gone so they could come collect their inheritance. Except there wasn't going to be an inheritance. Not the way they expected. I called Bob first. It rang 4 times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep. Sarah, what time is it? She's gone, Bob. Silence. Then, gone? What do you mean gone? I mean, she died 20 minutes ago. Oh. Pause. How are you holding up? Such a strange question. How was I holding up? I was exhausted, heartbroken, and sitting alone in a sterile room with the body of the only person in our family who had ever truly loved me. But I was also oddly peaceful. She'd completed her plan. She'd documented everything. She'd prepared her final justice. I'm okay. Good. Listen, I'll call Patty and Tyler, let them know. We should probably meet later today to discuss arrangements. Funeral arrangements, sure, but I heard the subtext. They wanted to discuss Dorothy's assets, her will, the division of her estate. They were probably already calculating their shares, planning how to spend their inheritance. Mr. Webb wants to meet with everyone. Who's Mr. Webb? Grandma's lawyer. Mom had a lawyer? Since when? Since 6 months ago, when she realized what you were planning. I don't know. He called this morning, said he needs to schedule a reading of her will. A reading? That's awfully formal. I mean, how much could Mom have really had? The house, maybe some savings? So much more than you know, and so much less than you deserve. He wants everyone there Friday at 2 o'clock. Everyone? You, Patty, Tyler, me. Well, sure, of course. I'll make sure everyone knows. He hung up without asking how she died, whether she was in pain, whether she had said anything at the end. He didn't ask if I needed anything, if I wanted company, if I was okay being alone with everything that had just happened. But that was okay. I wasn't alone. I had Dorothy's voice recordings, her evidence, her plan. I had the truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Jess. How are you holding up? Unlike Bob, she actually wanted an answer. She died this morning. I'm okay, but it's complicated. Want me to drive down? God, yes. I wanted Jess here. I wanted someone who actually cared about me, who wouldn't see Dorothy's death as a financial opportunity. Actually, yes. If you can get the time off, I'd really appreciate it. Already called in, leaving in an hour. That's what real family looked like. No hesitation, no conditions, no calculations. Just love and support when you needed it most. By noon, the hospital room had been cleared and Dorothy's body moved to the funeral home. I sat in my car in the parking lot, not ready to go back to her empty house, not ready to face the circus that was about to begin. Mr. Webb called while I was sitting there. Miss Mitchell, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. Thank you. I know this is a difficult time, but we need to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow's reading. Are you prepared for what's going to happen? Was I prepared to watch my family's world explode? Was I prepared to see them learn that their victim had been 10 steps ahead of them for months? Was I prepared to inherit everything while they inherited nothing but the consequences of their actions? I think so. It's going to be intense, he warned. Your grandmother's will is comprehensive.
She documented everything very thoroughly. Some of what's in those videos will be shocking, even to you. More shocking than what I already know? Your grandmother was a meticulous woman. She recorded conversations, kept receipts, tracked patterns of behavior going back years. What you've seen is just the beginning. I thought about the folders full of evidence, the audio recordings, the photographs of them spending her money on cruises while claiming poverty. They're going to be angry, I said. They're going to be devastated, he corrected. And yes, very angry. Are you sure you're ready for that? Mr. Webb, they let her die alone while living 10 minutes away. They stole thousands of dollars from an elderly woman. They planned to have her declared incompetent so they could steal even more. I think I can handle their anger. Good, because your grandmother specifically requested that you be the one to see this through. She said you were the only one strong enough to handle the truth. The truth. That's what this was all about. Not revenge, not punishment. Truth. I'll be there at 2 o'clock, I said. Miss Mitchell, your grandmother also wanted me to tell you something. She said to remind you that loving someone doesn't mean enabling them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions. After he hung up, I sat in the parking lot for another hour, watching normal people live their normal lives, going to work, picking up groceries, dealing with everyday problems that didn't involve family betrayal and posthumous justice. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, everything would change. The family would learn who Dorothy Mitchell really was, and they would learn who they really were too. The funeral home looked like it was trying too hard to be comforting. Soft piano music played over hidden speakers, and everything was beige or cream or some other color that whispered, respectful grief. Dorothy would have hated it. But she wasn't here to complain. Only her body was here, dressed in the blue dress she'd worn to my nursing school graduation, lying in a casket she never wanted. I stood at the back of the viewing room watching the performance begin. Bob arrived first, of course, wearing a black suit that looked expensive. He walked straight to the casket, placed his hand on the edge, and stood there for exactly 30 seconds, long enough to look appropriately grieved, not long enough to actually feel anything. Then he turned to survey the room like he was counting potential witnesses to his sorrow. Sarah? He approached me with open arms, pulling me into a hug that felt like a photo opportunity. How are you holding up? I'm managing. She looks peaceful, he said, glancing back at the casket. Like she's finally resting, as if her life had been such a burden that death was a relief. Patty arrived next, dressed in black from head to toe, her makeup carefully applied to suggest tears without actually ruining her mascara. She made a show of breaking down when she saw Dorothy's body, her sobs echoing through the quiet room. She was like a mother to me, she told the funeral director, loud enough for everyone to hear. I just can't believe she's gone. Like a mother, the woman she'd stolen from, gossiped about, and ignored for months. Tyler slouched in wearing a wrinkled black t-shirt and jeans that looked like he'd slept in them. He glanced at the casket, shrugged, and immediately started looking for somewhere to sit where he wouldn't have to interact with people. But it was Bob's eulogy that really showcased the family's talent for rewriting history. He began standing at the podium like he was running for office. Quote, "My mother was the heart of our family. She was always there when we needed her, always ready to help, always putting family first." Unquote. I watched from the front row as he transformed Dorothy from a woman they'd exploited into a saint they had cherished. He raised us to value family above everything else, to take care of each other, to never forget where we came from. His voice cracked with practiced emotion. I was blessed to be her son, blessed to learn from her wisdom, blessed to spend these last few years taking care of her the way she took care of us. Taking care of her. The man who'd visited her exactly twice in her final month was claiming to be her primary caretaker. She leaves behind a legacy of love, generosity, and family devotion that will guide us for generations to come. Generosity. Yes, she had been generous. Generous with money they'd stolen, generous with forgiveness they'd never earned, generous with love they'd never returned.
But the most telling moment came during the reception afterward. I was standing near the coffee table when I overheard Bob and Patty talking in low voices near the window. The house alone has to be worth at least $200,000, Bob was saying, and she had that investment account from Dad's life insurance. Don't forget the savings account. She never spent anything. Because we never let her, Bob chuckled, always telling her to be careful with money, save for emergencies. Good thing, too. How much do you think Tyler will get? Probably an equal share. Mom always tried to be fair, even when he didn't deserve it. An equal share. They were already dividing up the estate, calculating their portions like Dorothy's death was a windfall instead of a loss. What about Sarah? Patty asked. She'll get something, of course. Maybe some jewelry, personal items. She can't expect the same as immediate family. Immediate family. The immediate family who'd ignored Dorothy's final months while I drove 500 miles to hold her hand. I walked away before I said something that would ruin tomorrow's surprise. Maggie found me a few minutes later, her eyes red from genuine tears. She talked about you all the time, she said, squeezing my hand. She was so proud of you, said you were the only one who inherited her backbone. I'm going to miss her so much. She knew that. She also knew. Maggie glanced around, then lowered her voice. She knew what the others were really like. She wasn't fooled, honey, not for a minute. Did she tell you about tomorrow? Maggie nodded grimly. She said there was going to be a reckoning, said the truth was finally going to come out. Are you okay with that? Honey, I watched them treat her like garbage for years while she made excuses for them. If there's finally going to be consequences, I'm more than okay with it. The funeral ended with Bob shaking hands like a politician, Patty accepting condolences like she was the primary mourner, and Tyler disappearing the moment he thought no one was watching. None of them asked how I was doing. None of them offered to help with anything. None of them seemed to remember that I'd been the one actually taking care of Dorothy while they'd been making plans to spend her money. But that was fine. Tomorrow, they would remember. Tomorrow, they would understand exactly who Dorothy Mitchell had been and exactly who they were. Tomorrow, the truth would finally have its day. Webb and Associates looked nothing like the funeral home's desperate attempt at comfort. Steel and glass, clean lines, conference tables that meant business. I sat in the waiting area at 1:50 p.m., watching Bob pace by the windows while Patty checked her makeup in her phone camera. Tyler had shown up in the same wrinkled shirt from yesterday. This is taking forever, Bob muttered. How long does it take to read a simple will? Simple, if only he knew. The conference room door opened, and Harrison Webb emerged. Tall, silver-haired, wearing the kind of suit that whispered expensive without shouting it. He looked exactly like someone you'd want handling your final justice. Thank you all for coming. Please have a seat. We filed into the conference room like we were attending our own execution, which, in a way, 3 of us were. The table was polished mahogany, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than Tyler made in a month. At the head sat a large monitor, currently dark. In front of Webb's chair, a stack of folders thick enough to choke a horse, and a video camera on a tripod. I want to begin by saying that this is not a typical will reading, Webb said, settling into his chair with the gravitas of a judge. Mrs. Mitchell spent considerable time preparing for this moment. She wanted to ensure that her final wishes were understood completely, without ambiguity or misinterpretation. He reached for a remote control. The monitor flickered to life. Dorothy's face filled the screen, sitting in her living room chair, wearing the cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. She looked directly into the camera with eyes that were sharp, focused, completely lucid. If you're watching this, her recorded voice said, it means I'm dead, and you're all wondering what you're getting from my estate. Patty sucked in a sharp breath. Tyler's phone stopped scrolling. Before we discuss what you're receiving, I think it's important to discuss what you've already taken. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert, Patricia, Tyler, Sarah, you each played a role in my final years. Some of you played the role of loving family. Others, Dorothy paused, her smile thin as paper. Others played very different roles indeed. Bob leaned forward. Is this some kind of joke?
No interruptions, Webb said quietly. Mrs. Mitchell was very clear about that. Dorothy continued, I've spent the last 2.5 years documenting every interaction, every request for money, every lie, every manipulation. I've recorded conversations, saved text messages, photographed evidence, and tracked financial transactions.
Tyler went white. She can't do that. Recording people without permission is illegal. Actually, Webb interjected, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording. Mrs. Mitchell was well within her legal rights. Some of you assumed that because I was old, I was also stupid. Dorothy's voice continued from the speakers. You assumed I wouldn't notice money disappearing from my accounts. You assumed I wouldn't question obvious lies about emergency expenses. You assumed I would go quietly into senility, leaving my assets unprotected and my memory unreliable. She leaned forward slightly, and her expression hardened. You were wrong. The silence in the room was surgical. Let me tell you what I discovered. Let me show you what I documented. Let me explain why my will distributes my assets the way it does. Dorothy's image froze on screen as Webb reached for the first folder. She prepared individual presentations for each of you, he said. Detailed accountings of your behavior, your financial requests, your treatment of her during her final years. She wanted each of you to understand exactly how your actions influenced her decisions. Bob's face was red. This is insane. She was clearly not of sound mind when... Mr. Mitchell, Webb's voice cut like a blade. I spent months with your mother preparing this will. I interviewed her extensively, had her evaluated by 2 independent physicians, and documented her mental acuity at every stage. She was, without question, of completely sound mind and clear intent. He opened the first folder. Let's start with you, Robert. The monitor came back to life. Dorothy sat in the same chair, but now she held a manila folder thick with papers. Robert, my eldest son, the one who told everyone he was taking care of me. Bob's jaw clenched. Mom, I was taking care of you. But Dorothy couldn't hear his protests. She was speaking from beyond the grave, armed with evidence he'd never imagined she possessed. Let's discuss the $3,000 you borrowed for emergency furnace repair on October 15th of last year. She held up a bank statement, the withdrawals circled in red ink. Emergency furnace repair. Those were your exact words. Mom, our furnace died. It's going to be freezing tonight. We need $3,000 right now or the pipes will freeze. Bob shifted in his chair. The furnace did need repair. Dorothy continued as if she could hear him. I was concerned, of course. Emergency home repairs are expensive, and I wanted to help my son protect his family. She set down the bank statement and picked up a photograph. This is you and Patricia on a cruise ship 3 days later. The photo filled the screen. Bob and Patty, tropical drinks in hand, ocean in the background, beaming at the camera. The date stamp was clear, October 18th. Interesting timing for a cruise, considering your heating emergency. Patty made a small choking sound. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that I drove by your house that same week. The furnace repair truck was never there, Robert, because there was no emergency furnace repair. She reached for another document. The $3,000 went directly into your checking account on October 15th. On October 16th, you purchased cruise tickets for you and Patricia. The receipt is right here. The receipt appeared on screen, every detail crystal clear. You lied to me, Robert. You created a fake emergency to steal money from your dying mother so you could take a vacation. Bob stood up. Now wait just a goddamn minute. Sit down, Webb said, his voice carrying absolute authority. What kind of consequences? The kind that involve your mother's evidence being forwarded to the district attorney's office for elder abuse charges. Bob sat down. Dorothy's presentation continued for another 10 minutes. 3 years of documented theft, manipulation, and lies. The time he'd forged her signature on a loan application, the credit card he'd opened in her name without permission, the standing transfer he'd set up from her account to his, disguised as household assistance. By the time her video ended, Bob looked like he'd been physically beaten. "Patricia," Dorothy's voice said as the image changed. "My beloved daughter-in-law." Patty's video was worse. Where Bob's theft had been direct, Patty's had been insidious. Years of gossip designed to isolate Dorothy from friends and neighbors, systematic emotional manipulation. Text messages to relatives claiming Dorothy is losing her mind and needs professional help. She held up printed screenshots of text messages. "Here you are telling my sister that I'm dangerously confused. Here you are telling the neighbors that I'm not safe living alone. Here you are spreading rumors that I'm hiding money in the walls because I don't trust banks."
Each screenshot appeared on the monitor. Patty's lies displayed in stark black and white. The goal, of course, was to have me declared incompetent. Then Robert could take power of attorney, move me into a care facility, and liquidate my assets. Patty was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. "I have recordings of you and Robert discussing this plan in detail. Would you like to hear them?" "No," Patty whispered. But Dorothy had already pressed play on an audio recording. Patty's voice filled the room, discussing Dorothy's deteriorating mental state and the need to act before she gives everything away. Tyler's presentation was the shortest, but perhaps the most damning. 3 years of emergency loans that were never repaid, college tuition for classes he never attended, car payments for a car he'd sold for gambling money, rent assistance for an apartment he'd been evicted from months earlier. "You saw me as an ATM," Dorothy said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less. You never visited unless you needed money. You never called unless you had an emergency. You never once asked how I was doing, only what I could do for you." She held up a notebook filled with dates and amounts. $4,267. That's how much you've stolen from me over the past 3 years. Not borrowed, Tyler. Stolen. Because borrowing implies an intention to repay. Tyler had stopped looking at the screen entirely. He sat slumped in his chair, staring at his hands. "But the worst part," Dorothy continued, "wasn't the theft. It was the cruelty. The way you talked about me when you thought I couldn't hear. The jokes you made about waiting for me to die. The bets you made with friends about how much you'd inherit." She leaned closer to the camera. "I heard everything, Tyler. I recorded everything. I documented everything." The room fell silent as Tyler's video ended. 3 family members exposed, their lies and theft laid bare with methodical precision. Then Dorothy's face reappeared, and she smiled. "Now, let's discuss my will. The distribution of my estate reflects the character you've each demonstrated over the past 3 years. It's based not on blood relation or family tradition, but on how you've actually treated me." Webb opened the final folder, thick with legal documents. "Robert Mitchell, you will inherit the sum of $100. Bob's mouth fell open. $100? That's impossible. I'm her eldest son. "The amount," Dorothy continued, "represents approximately $1 for every day you lived 10 minutes away from me while I was dying alone." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Patricia Mitchell, you will inherit $50, representing the approximate value of the groceries you claimed to buy for me, but never delivered." Patty made a sound like she was choking. "Tyler Mitchell, you will inherit $25, representing the only time you ever paid for anything when we had lunch together 3 years ago." Tyler didn't react. He seemed to have shut down entirely. "These amounts are intentionally small but legally significant," Dorothy explained. "They prove that you were not forgotten or overlooked. You were considered and judged." She paused. Let that sink in. "The remainder of my estate, including my house, savings accounts, investment portfolios, and all personal property, goes to Sarah Mitchell." The words hit the room like a physical force.
Bob shot to his feet. "She can't do this. Sarah manipulated her. This is elder abuse." "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell," Webb said calmly, "or I'll have security remove you."
Sarah, Dorothy's voice continued, gets everything because she's the only one who loved me without conditions. She's the only one who visited without agenda. She's the only one who never asked for money, never lied to me, never treated me like an inconvenience to be managed. The camera moved closer to Dorothy's face. She drove 500 miles to hold my hand while I died. You lived 10 minutes away and couldn't be bothered to visit. Bob was pacing now, his face purple with rage. "This is fraud. She was senile. She didn't know what she was doing." "Actually," Webb said, pulling out another folder, "that brings us to the final element of Mrs. Mitchell's will." He opened the folder to reveal official-looking documents with government letterheads. Mrs. Mitchell was so confident you would challenge her mental competency that she had herself evaluated by 2 independent psychiatrists, a neurologist, and a geriatric specialist, all within the past 6 months. He spread the reports across the table. Every single evaluation confirms that she was of completely sound mind, exceptional memory, and clear judgment right up until her death. But more importantly, Webb continued, she also documented your financial crimes against her. He pulled out a thick stack of papers bound with rubber bands. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, elder financial abuse. She's provided evidence of every crime, including dates, amounts, and documentation. All of this has been forwarded to the district attorney's office. The color drained from Bob's face. "You can't prosecute a dead woman's fantasies." "These aren't fantasies, Mr. Mitchell. They're felonies." Webb pulled out one final document. "This is a restraining order, preventing any of you from contesting the will or approaching Sarah to discuss the inheritance. Violation will result in immediate prosecution for harassment and elder abuse."
He looked around the table at 3 stunned faces. "Mrs. Mitchell wanted me to read you one final message." Dorothy's voice filled the room one last time. "You taught me that family isn't about blood relation. It's about how you treat people when they're vulnerable. You treated me like a bank account. Sarah treated me like a grandmother." She paused. "Now you'll both get exactly what you deserve." The monitor went dark. The room fell silent. Bob, Patty, and Tyler sat in their chairs like survivors of a natural disaster, staring at the wreckage of their expectations. Sarah sat quietly, understanding finally why Dorothy had made her promise to see the plan through to completion. This wasn't just about money. This was about truth, accountability, and the difference between family and relatives. This was Dorothy Mitchell's final lesson in justice. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of Dorothy's house, my house now, making coffee in the same pot she'd used for 20 years. The morning light streamed through windows I'd had professionally cleaned, illuminating a space that finally felt like home instead of a crime scene. The silence was different now, not the hollow quiet of abandonment, but the peaceful silence of a place where someone was genuinely wanted. My phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Coffee later? I want to hear about the job interview." The job interview had nurse position at Cedar Falls Memorial, the same hospital where Dorothy had died. I'd moved back to her town 3 months ago, using part of the inheritance to pay off my student loans, and the rest to start over somewhere that didn't carry the weight of old family obligations. "Interview went great," I texted back. "They offered me the position on the spot."
Celebrating tonight, then. I'll bring wine. Jess had moved with me, found work at a local marketing firm, never once complained about leaving Chicago behind. Real family followed you into new chapters. Toxic family tried to drag you back into old ones. The doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a delivery truck pulling away and a certified letter on the doorstep. I knew what it was before I opened it. the district attorney's office. Bob had been indicted on 4 counts of elder financial abuse and 2 counts of identity theft. The trial was scheduled for next month. Tyler had already pled guilty to avoid jail time, but he'd have to pay full restitution plus penalties. Money he didn't have and couldn't borrow because his credit was destroyed. Patty had moved to Florida to live with her sister, claiming she needed to start fresh somewhere people didn't know her business. The truth was simpler. No one in Cedar Falls would look at her the same way after Dorothy's evidence became public record. I folded the letter and set it on the counter next to Dorothy's coffee cup. The one I used every morning, the one with faded flowers and a chip on the handle that she'd refused to throw away. "You'd be proud," I said to the empty kitchen. "They're all getting exactly what they earned." But justice wasn't the best part of Dorothy's legacy. The best part was discovering what life looked like when you stopped being everyone's emergency fund and started being your own person. I'd bought a car without asking anyone's opinion. I'd taken a vacation without justifying the expense. I'd said no to requests for money without feeling guilty. I'd learned the difference between being helpful and being used. The house phone rang, Dorothy's old landline that I'd kept connected out of stubbornness and sentiment.
Sarah, it's Maggie. Are you busy?
Never too busy for you. What's up?
I was wondering if you'd like to come to dinner Sunday. My granddaughter's visiting from college, and I'd love for you to meet her.
I'd like that.
Good. And Sarah, Dorothy would be so proud of how you've handled everything. She always said you were stronger than you knew. After Maggie hung up, I walked through the house Dorothy had left me, the living room where she'd sat in her recliner planning her final justice, the bedroom where she'd hidden folders full of evidence, the kitchen where she'd made me promise to see her plan through to completion. Every room held memories now, but they weren't painful ones. They were reminders of a woman who'd loved me enough to protect me even from beyond the grave, who'd seen my worth when I couldn't see it myself, who'd given me the tools to build a life free from people who saw love as leverage. I opened my laptop and started typing. My family left Grandma to die alone. I drove 500 miles to be with her. What I discovered at her will reading changed everything. It was time to tell Dorothy's story. Time to share what I'd learned about toxic family dynamics, about the difference between obligation and love, about the courage it takes to document truth when everyone around you profits from lies. The story would go viral, like these stories always did. People would recognize their own families in Dorothy's experience. They'd see their own exhaustion in my journey. They'd understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling people who don't appreciate your sacrifice. But more than that, they'd learn what Dorothy had taught me, that real family isn't about blood relation or guilt or obligation. Real family is about showing up, about caring without conditions, about loving someone enough to drive 500 miles in the middle of the night just to hold their hand. I'd found that kind of family in Jess, in Maggie, in the hospice nurses who'd cried at Dorothy's funeral. I'd found it in coworkers who asked how I was doing and actually waited for an answer. I'd found it in neighbors who brought soup when I was sick and didn't expect anything in return. The people who'd shared my blood had taught me what family wasn't. Dorothy had taught me what family was. And that lesson was worth more than any inheritance. The coffee finished brewing. I poured a cup, added cream the way Dorothy had taught me, and sat at the kitchen table where she'd planned her final justice. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered to the morning light. "For everything." Outside, Cedar Falls was waking up. People starting their days, living their lives, figuring out their own complicated relationships with family and love
an obligation. Inside, I was finally home.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.